In the welcome gardens of the Catholic Franciscan compound, uh, built on top of a part of the old city of Capernaum. The Greek Orthodox compound on the other side of this remains of the white synagogue. The boat dock beyond that. The town stretched along the lake a bit, kind of thin and long, yeah, along the lake shore. When we come to Capernaum today, it's a pleasant place, even more so when we don't have a lot of other buses, right? It's a nice, pleasant place. Josephus loved the place. Josephus, the first century historian, as near as we can tell, he was a Galilean. He talked in overabundance about the Galilee and how beautiful the weather is and how fertile the ground is and all of this, how nice the people are. He talked about the area here, Capernaum, as a place where the quality of the air is perfectly mixed, so that plants that normally fight with each other get along here. I think that means it was always the growing season for everything, yeah? Growing equally. He talks about it being watered by a fertile spring, and just a pleasant place to be. When Mark Twain came here, he was not all that reverent in his writings. When Mark Twain came here in 1867, he called it a mournful and dreadful place. He noticed around the sea one tree, total, at Tiberias, and this was just a burnt-off landscape of weeds and thistles. A few stones sticking up out of the ground, but not much at all. When Mark Twain got to Magdala, he noticed that the girls in town, the Arab village, he said, had black makeup around their eyes. And when he got closer, he realized it was flies around their eyes. It was not a pleasant place, this northern shore. Malaria-driven area up above with the swamps of the Hula Basin and so on. A land of contrast, right? We can thank the Franciscans for giving a bit of life back to the area. There's some excavation that's taken place here, and I'll let you, as we go, have a poke in different spots. Basically, behind this fence, there's areas of excavation. Behind that fence is areas of excavation. Up here is areas of excavation. And wherever we dig, we find common houses from the time of Jesus. We'll wait till Chorazin to explain what they are. But wherever we dig, here, at the other sites, Bethsaida, Chorazin, Katsrin, other places, Magdala, around the northern shore, it's more or less the same kind of a house plan. I suppose if we dug here, we would find the same thing. We also find here remains of a synagogue from the time, what appears to be the time of the New Testament, certainly from the Byzantine period, and we find remains of one of these housing units was turned into a church, a Byzantine, octagon Byzantine church. The church today has this building built over the top of it. We can walk over that direction in a bit. It's meant to look like by the architect, a boat on the sea. Most visitors say a spaceship landed. So you can take your choice. It's built on pillars that do not penetrate the archaeological remains of the house. The remains here are a later Byzantine synagogue. The white stone is not native here. The stone native is the darker basalt. You see the darker gray and black stone. And the stone here imported to kind of give the synagogue a bit of a pop in town, a bit of a look. Now, let's do this. We were in Nazareth, around Nazareth, and we spent a little bit of time in a crowded place up on top looking down, characterizing a little bit about what Nazareth was like, as near as we could tell based on the geography, and based on the archaeology, and based on the texts that we have. And can you give me a couple of quick summary statements? What did we say about Nazareth, the location of Jesus?
Isolated,
Yeah, isolated.
barren.
Yeah, not much of a place. No, you're never going to get rich there. Folks could live kind of in poor places and all, off route. And next to it, like over the top of the hill,
Prosperous.
really good, isn't it? Yeah, two very prosperous valleys and contrast up there. So let's do the same thing here. And let's do it this way. If you were a resident of Capernaum in the first century, if you lived here, all right, let's do it this way. What do you think you'd do all day? Today we'd say do for a living, but what do you think you'd do all day? Here, okay? And if you suggest something, fish is always the first suggestion made. If you suggest something, I want you to give me evidence of it, not just like guessing. So how do you know there were fishermen here? All right, you've got the sea. All right, you've got the sea, the largest and really only body of fresh water out on the lake. You've got something like 20-ish, 22-ish native species of fish out there. Most of them, the Jews said, were kosher, which means they have scales and fins. You've got eels, you've got catfish. They're not kosher, but most of them are kosher. The fish don't care which side of the lake they're on. There are Gentile villages roundabout. Their fishermen would probably haul up the same kind of stuff, right? So you would see maybe, you can have this eel if you give me 2 of those, that sort of thing around the lake. But a profitable, you could say, fishing center around the lake, all right? Jesus calls fishermen, doesn't he? A disproportionately large number of fishermen, you might say, compared to what people did in the rest of the country. You don't have many fishermen, right, in the desert, but you do hear a lot of shepherds, a lot of grain farmers, but not a lot of fishermen. Sort of makes you wonder why that is. Is there something about the quality of life? Maybe the backbone you have to grow yourself? Maybe the toil and so on out on the sea? What fishermen are like, perhaps, that caused that? Or was it just an accident of who happened to be here? Perhaps. All right. Fishing.
Maybe
Fishing.
Patience for the job they had and the job he
Maybe.
wanted them to do.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so.
Had to be
These-
merchants, people.
Quality. All right. What else would you do? You had to have...
A marketplace where you got vegetables, where you had
All right.
farmers.
Every town is going to have a market, I would imagine, right? I mean, every town today has an insurance man, right? So every town has a market in it. What you don't have here is a lot of good agricultural land. There's no plain here. It comes out of the sea and goes right up the slope. We'll be doing that in a bit, and it's this rough bouldery stuff. So to have something to eat that's not just fish, you'd need to have
Move it in.
you'd have to have moving in, and because there are so many fish here, you'd have to be moving it out as well. So some sort of market, all right, some sort of market you would have. Let me give you a couple of things that tie into that. There is a page in your book here, page 146, a map of the Sea of Galilee. And the boat docks are indicated. The map's not to scale. The dock didn't go that far out into the lake, but you get the idea, right? The boat docks are indicated. When the lake is a little bit low, the foundations are still there. I mean, the rest of the dock isn't. These are the docks from the time of the New Testament. We know that because of the pottery associated with them. Because we know where the boat docks are, we can assume that the level of the lake in Jesus' day was more or less the same. Maybe 20 feet up, 20 feet down, but more or less the same. The shape of the lake was more or less the same. And we also see that all of the towns around the lake had one, including En-Geb, where we just came from. There was a boat dock. Magdala has one, a quay. The town that doesn't is Tiberias, the capital. That's almost certainly because that city was the one that maintained itself over the centuries, and the boat dock has disappeared because of the That's the current modern seawall that kind of goes straight down. It kind of changed the line of the shore. The reason I mention this is because the town that has more than one is Capernaum. In fact, Capernaum has 7 boat docks. That's a disproportionately large number, which suggests that this was not just a town of fishing, this was a center of fishing and market. Exactly. Shipping the fish out. We know that the main market that takes them out to the Mediterranean was in Tiberias. That was kind of a tax buy and sell place. And we know that at Magdala, the fish were salted so that they could be preserved and sent. But it seems that most of them seem to be caught up here on the Capernaum line. And that actually makes sense when you think about the lake. The Jordan River is coming in on the one side, bringing all kinds of good organic fish food with it. And on the other side, there are warm springs that tend to moderate the temperature of the water, so the fish, even in the wintertime, tend to feed high. You saw all the algae as we were coming in? Right. All of this is good for fishing. And Capernaum sort of right in the middle of that as a dominant fishing location. All right, the land is working for us, helping us understand. What else do you think you might do for a living here? I can think of some more things. Okay, why do you say construction? What's your evidence for that? You know, we've got a lot here from the 1st century. More than we have from Bethsaida, more than we have from Chorazin, you know, more than we have from some of these other towns. There's a lot going on here, as you would expect a center of economy like we have has. Most of the building here is regular houses. It's not terribly fancy stuff, but still. So I would imagine people involved in constructing.
Building homes.
Building. What do you call a guy who's a builder in local building materials? A tecton, a builder. We talked about this at Sepphoris. We talked about how Jesus and Joseph were one. We talked about how Jesus and Joseph may well have been attracted to live in Sepphoris because that's where the jobs were. This was also a growing city. And I'm not suggesting that Jesus withdrew to the sea from Nazareth here simply because this is where the jobs were. There's probably other reasons as well. But I would suggest this, and this is a point that sometimes they get kickback on. That's okay. I would suggest this. Look, we know from Jewish writings, Mishnah, Talmud, other Jewish writings that reflect this time period, that rabbis also had a real job. They weren't just rabbiing. In fact, there's a whole list of jobs in the Mishnah that the rabbi is told he can teach his son to do, and a whole list of jobs you're not supposed to do. Shopkeeper is one you're not supposed to do. Go to the old city and tell me how many of these guys are honest, and then you tell me if this is a job here that instills honesty. So stay away from that job, the Mishnah said. All right, a whole list of jobs. And when we have rabbis mentioned, they're often mentioned in connection with a nickname telling us what job they did. And it was more than just being a rabbi. In fact, the New Testament talks about one rabbi who ended up, even after he became the greatest evangelistic missionary in the book of Acts, he kept making tents to pay for his own way. Yeah? There's an example. There's an example. Rabbi Akiva, who was the great rabbi of the Second Revolt, everybody was looking to him as the Messiah. His job to make money was to dig ditches. Not many. Ray, how does that sound for your Wednesday and Thursday?
I think I'll pass.
Ditch digger. Yeah. A rabbi from Lakish. Are you ready for this? Gladiator.
Now we're talking.
Now we're talking, right? Yep. Middle linebacker. How's that one? You know, middle linebacker on. Problem is they play on Sunday too, right? Yeah. You get the idea.
No concussion protocol back then.
Yep. and this is supposition, but I mean, Jesus has a skill, and rabbis tend to use those skills. And Jesus' skill is the kind of skill that gets him into people's houses, gets to know people this way, conversations this way. And I just wonder if he sort of helped folk here on that level as well. We'll touch base on that idea in 2 other places yet today. I just want to introduce it as a possibility. What else might people do in a town like this?
Anything associated with fishing equipment.
Okay, so let me do this one and then this one, all right? Are y'all y'all saying your favorite job here, maybe, huh? All right, you've clearly you're going to have people who know how to make boat docks and keep them up. You're going to know people who know how to make nets and mend them, although the fishermen also mended nets. You know, one time before we actually sailed into Engev, and the net mender was there mending nets. Still, they had to bring them over from the other side of the lake. Not everybody can do this. You know, special skills, technon skills. So net mending. Can you imagine? Here's one. Jesus, the tekton from Nazareth, comes to Capernaum, sees people building houses. Oh, I can do that. Sees somebody building yokes and plows. I can do that. Sees somebody building a boat or repairing a boat. That's hard. Every piece of wood is a different shape. Every last one, a different bend and angle. I can sort of see him saying, let me try that. We don't build boats in Nazareth. Let me try that. Let me help. You know? Hands-on. I can think, I'm not sure they had a bank per se, but they did have people who control the flow of money. Control the flow of money. Money changers or money takers, maybe. You meet a guy here named Matthew. Yeah, you meet a guy here named Matthew. He's the last disciple called in the book of Matthew, chapter 9. Sitting by the toll booth. Jesus comes up, Matthew chapter 9. Jesus goes from there, sees a man called Matthew. That's a Jewish name. In Luke, he's called Levi. That's also a Jewish name. In fact, you can't get more Jewish than Levi, right? The priesthood guy, right? Sitting in the tax booth, follow me. He got up and followed him. All right. Couple of questions this raises. Number one, why would there be a tax collector in Capernaum, do you think?
Prosperous city.
Okay, prosperous city. The economy that we've mentioned already. All right, more than that.
Exporting fish.
Exporting and importing beyond.
Fish market.
More than that. More than that. More than that. We have, let me show you this map. Marked my map number 5 a different way. Sorry. Yeah. Marked this map. I showed you this, I think, already. Look. How do you know where the main road goes? The road is going to carry the fish. It's going to carry the whatever in and out. I mean, every town is going to have little roads. Main roads, this is tricky. Here's the principle. Main roads connect main cities. All right. Is there a big road between San Antonio and Houston? Yeah. All right. Main roads connect main cities. So, what are the main cities up here in Jesus' day? Tiberias is going to be one. That's the new capital on the lake. Caesarea Philippi is going to be one, where Herod has built his temple to the divine Caesar, and you've got the Herod Philip is putting that palace up. Bethsaida is one, because Bethsaida was also raised to the level of a polis, a formal Greek city, according to Josephus, and that's over there. Tiberias is there, Bethsaida is there, Caesarea Philippi is directly north of Bethsaida. Draw the easiest line between Tiberias and Bethsaida. and it goes right through Capernaum. It goes right through Capernaum. How many major highways went through Nazareth? 0. They avoided it. This one goes right through Capernaum. Right through Capernaum. More than that, so that helps you with your trade. But more than that, Bethsaida, the next town over, was given to Philip, Herod's son. The region up there, Philip's territory. We call it Gaulonitis, after the Golan. Sounds like a disease. Capernaum and Tiberias were part of Galilee. So between us and Bethsaida, the next town over, and a boundary. Let's call it an international boundary between 2 of the districts in the Galilee. And every time you cross an international boundary, you also pay tax. You pay tax crossing a boundary. We know from texts found in Egypt from the 1st century along the Nile that if you wanted to fish out of a freshwater inland body of water, you had to get a business license and pay tax on what you catch. And we can assume the same thing here. So we've got Rome interested in money coming through this place, and Rome declaring the right to collect tax on people moving through, people harvesting fish, people exporting and importing, and they also taxed you just because you were alive. You're alive, you have to pay a tax. All right? Some people say 60 to 80% of income was taxed. Sorry, tax was 60. I said that the wrong way around. Exactly. 60 to 80% of your income was taxed. You know what I mean? You got to live on the other 40 to 20% of it. All right. Include some taxes to the temple as well. Wow. Tax collector here. We talked a little bit about a tax collector
Does it say regional tax? Here or
later chief, but the 2 we meet are Jericho and here.
But one of them says regional.
Chief tax collector.
Chief tax collector. which is
Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector and very rich.
Here.
In Jericho.
Oh, Zacchaeus.
In Zacchaeus.
So
I would
Matthew
imagine.
might have worked for him.
I would imagine this guy is the same way. Matthew's the same way, in the northern district. He's at a critical part in the northern district. He's pretty far up.
So commentaries put Zacchaeus' wealth in the billions in today's money. Can that be true?
No, that's too much. That's too much. He's taxing billions of revenue going through, but he himself can't. Not that much. No. No. It might have felt like it. I mean, the mass of people down here have almost nothing, and there's a thin line coming off of it where he would be. Might have felt like that to the other, but no, that's too much.
Where the greatest revenue potential is going to be, that's where the number 1 tax collector is going to be.
Yes, and there's a huge tax revenue here on all kinds.
You bet.
All right, now, so follow this discussion. Jesus has picked up already 11 disciples. A lot of them are fishermen. A lot of them are just regular guys, most of them, trying to eke a living out of the land, you know. And he says, wait a minute, we need 12, 12 tribes of Israel. Let's get a 12th guy. Who should we have, Peter? Well, I got another cousin who's nice, he's interested, How about you, Philip? Well, Yossi was good, up in, we bring him in. Jesus says, what about Matthew? Representing everything that sucks our life out of us. I can imagine Peter, just imagine, again, trying to make a go of it. He's out there all night on the sea of chaos. The storm comes up. He can barely survive. He's trying to haul up enough fish. He knows he has to pay tax on it. These guys are clever. That's the word. So he puts in down shore maybe a few hundred yards. Andrew's waiting for him. Throws half the catch off. Goes back out to the sea as the sun is coming up. Rows in. Matthew says, how much you catch today? Oh, not so much. Not so much to pay today, do I? Oh, not so much. I'm sure Peter wouldn't do that, yeah? I'm sure he wouldn't. But they avoid this guy. Look what he's done to them. Let me give you another conversation. Because the tax collector, we think of him as the guy who has the right to take all your tax, right? Guess what also he has the right to do? Be gracious and remit it. And wouldn't it be great if we had the the best tax auditor ever in the pews, with us, the guy who powerful people in high places to give us favors. That one would work too, wouldn't it? Maybe we need Matthew. Get him on our side, right?
So Judas suggested
Maybe.
Matthew, maybe.
I wonder. If Nolan Ryan keeps beating us when he's with the Rangers, why don't we just bring him down to the Astros instead? Or did he go the other way around? I forget. He went the other way around. Okay, sorry.
Well, he ceases being a tax collector though as soon as he kind of abandons his post, though, right?
Well, I don't know. Let me read this. This is John the Baptist speaking. When Jesus goes down to be baptized. What should we do? They ask him. Luke chapter 3. If you have 2 tunics, share with one who has none. If you have food, share it with somebody who has none. Tax collectors came to him to be baptized. What should we do? And John said, just collect no more than what you've been ordered to. Go back and do your job, just do it fair. Soldiers came, occupying soldiers came. What should we do? And John had every opportunity to say, quit your job, work for us. He said, no, just don't be oppressive when you're enforcing Rome's will. Okay? If you're keep being a tax collector, just do it right. Just do it right. And based on that, I wonder if Matthew kept going. After the disciples, we see them. After the resurrection, where do you find them? They're fishing again. That's what they know. This is their job. This is their income. That also maybe is a little bit of a poke to me to say, maybe Jesus the same way, kept doing what he does. Society needs, look, if we all became full-time pastors, who would, what?
We'd all go to heaven.
Yeah, that too. who would do what needs to be done to make society work on an everyday life? And I think what Jesus is doing is exactly what John was doing, which is exactly what the rabbis already sensed. We need to redeem the occupations that we have and do the job right where we are. Yeah, do the job right. Now, there are some, I suppose, that are inherently evil, that we shouldn't be those people. The ladies of the night and the guys who create such positions. A lot of other jobs you'll have to decide yourself,
So Paul, why
and all, but
is there not a
tecton?
tecton among the disciples?
Maybe the 13th guy is.
That's who Jesus would have known more.
Maybe. Well, first of all, we don't know what some of their jobs were. We don't know what Bartholomew was. We don't know what Philip's job was. We don't know what Thomas's job was. We don't know. So maybe Jesus was that guy. Maybe he was that guy. We don't know. He's bringing together a band of people who represent something that this town has that the other town doesn't have. Who else would you have here? I can think of another 1, 2, 3 at least that you would have. The Bible helps us. If you're going to have, who's mentioned in the Bible? Who do you meet in Capernaum? You meet a centurion in Capernaum in the Gospel of Luke. His servant is sick, about to die. He goes to the Jewish elders and he says, you get Jesus to come and heal my servant. All right? Jairus, he's a centurion. Why would you need a centurion here? Partly to protect Matthew, right? It's a border town. It's a busy town. You've probably got soldiers garrisoned here that are all over, in the area. But this is their home. How many soldiers, maybe, the centurion is going to have? 100. So I don't know how big you think Capernaum is, but if there's 100 soldiers here, it's going to be a decent place, isn't it? And this is going to feel occupied down here. This is going to feel like you're back in Rome. This is a Jewish village that's going to have this intrusive heavy hand on it. And people are going to feel it. They're going to feel, if I were back home, I'd be sued for this. I'm in Israel. I'm not going to be sued for this. This is how they feel. Sorry. This is how they feel. Life is tough. Life is tough. They're protecting Matthew as well. The centurion here, we read, he's worth, Jesus, you healing the servant because he loves our nation. Our ethnos is the word. He loves us and he built us our synagogue. Meaning the available funds that he had, maybe the kickback from Matthew, he put right back into the community and is trying to embrace an environment here that is going to make Rome the friendly giant and not the oppressive power. He built the synagogue. We meet religious people here too. We get scribes here, we get Pharisees here. We don't have Sadducees here. The Sadducees are temple connected. We don't get priests here. They're in Jerusalem with the temple. We don't get Essenes here. They're in the temple and in Qumran. But we do get scribes and Pharisees. And these are the religious people that were sent among the masses. Their job was to be out with the people. The parish priest. Not the priests in the Vatican, the ones out in the villages, all the way around. They're the ones teaching. They're the ones who are working with the people. And they're the ones who are encouraging people to live lives of wholeness the way that they're defined by Torah. And we find, we'll see in a minute, that people get tired of listening to them. It's the same sermon again and again and again. All right. Ray, have you preached the same sermon multiple times?
They didn't listen the first time. So
I know
I
that.
mean,
why do it the second time? I've tried to. We have our student body more or less changes every semester. So if I do a Vespers thing, I'll try to do it again in a couple of years. Never works the same way the second time. A little bit flat. It's not quite as tight with you and all. And this is apparently what's happening here. And the new rabbi in town has a lot of exciting things to say. Yeah. Let me give you another one. Josephus, the first century historian, tells us that when he was riding his horse, this is in the 60s, so about a generation after Jesus. But he was riding his horse over here where the Jordan River comes in, toward Bethsaida, where there's a lot of boulders and tangled underbrush, and the water and the bank is soft. The horse stumbled and fell. And Josephus was pitched off the horse and broke his arm. And that he came to Capernaum to go to the doctor. Came here to go to the doctor. So it tells you it's really a center of life in many ways. Please do not go home and say that doctor was Luke. All right? But it does tell me this, that we maybe shouldn't think about Luke as some very Johnny-come-lately, highly educated guy that would not have been here, that Jesus or Paul kind of picked up on the way somewhere else. But those very highly educated, those fluent people, very interactive people, some people very prosperous and others just trying to make a go of it, people very clever, and people being clever at getting away from clever people. The shopkeepers are clever, and you need to be too, don't you? Right? To make it work. Such a wide variety of people that you do not have in Nazareth. And people that represent ways of life, not just ethnically or language-wise, but ways of life that are fully inclusive of what an urban center would have. Only on a smaller scale, around a lake that's an international body of water. You have an area to the west that is Galilee, comfortably Jewish. You have an area up here, Philip's territory, that is kind of a mixed area, and where we spent the last 3 nights, En Gev, Decapolis, in your face, Gentile. Latin, Greek, Aramaic, Hebrew, and everything that goes with it. And Jesus withdraws to the sea. He leaves that much more provincial, much more isolated place, a good place to grow up. You get some, salt of the earth values. And then let's see how they work in the rest of the world. Let's see how it works. In a place that is going to interact him with others, where the gospel can be heard and received. You have in your book here some Capernaum pages that show the synagogue that is today built. Underneath it, I can see over here. Underneath it, I see the foundation is black basalt. Yeah? And the foundation there is not on the same line. It's a little bit different angle. And the black basalt foundation is the kind of stone that connects with the New Testament town, and the building above it is later. And what we think is that black basalt is the foundation of an earlier synagogue in the same place, and maybe even the one that was built, paid for by the centurion, that Jesus would have known. Anyway, the synagogue is there. On your other page, you have blocks of houses here. Blocks of houses with individual living space rooms within. Just many blocks of them. One of them, we find, this one, bottom left, one room in it already in the 1st century had Christian graffiti scratched into the plaster. That very same room then becomes the center room of an octagon Byzantine church. Churches built as an octagon were built to remember things that Jesus did. And the suggestion is, since it preserves that earlier church house, that this was the home of Peter and the bedroom of Jesus, where the early Christians met. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what people say. If the church is open, I can see somebody coming down. The middle has a glass floor. You look right down to that room, which may well be Jesus' bedroom. Okay.
Did they have public latrines, or did they have...
In the big cities, yes.
In the small towns, though?
We don't see
the houses
remains.
are so small, yeah.
The houses did not, no.
Right.
No, you would go out. You would go out of the camp. You would leave the village.
Okay.
The big cities did have, and they were public and without partitions. So everybody would just sit in a row at once.
If you were sick, you could wear out a pair of sandals in a hurry.
Yeah. I mean, there are probably spots, where you then throw it out the window or something.
And what about bathing?
Hardly. The book of Isaiah and the book of Psalms both talk about mire in the streets. Mire in the streets. And we read that Jeremiah, when he was thrown into the cistern, he sunk in the mire. That's a kind word that means more than mud. All right? In the streets and in the cisterns as well. So that much we can assume, yes. And the bathing, not so much. These guys are fortunate they have a lake. The fishermen can at least get wet once in a while. But most people know. Most people know, yes.
There also wasn't a wine press here, correct?
You're going to have a wine press. And you're going to have as well, another thing. You're going to have a wine press and you're going to have olive presses. Both of them here.
So, is there one to be seen at Gethsemane, or do you want to take us there?
We can see it. The pieces are, the Gethsemane one is better to look at as a press. The pieces here are disjointed. And there are also grain mills here as well. Grain mills where you would thresh grain, where you would crush olives. And the pressing equipment is found here. And there's actually more found here, the archaeologists who dug here, than the town would normally use. These are everybody wouldn't own one, they would be collective. And the suggestion, this was also a place where they were manufactured. So like a John Deere plant in town as well. So, all right, so let's do some of that. Want to read just a little bit here, Gospel of Mark, chapter 1. Gospel of Mark, chapter 1. Jesus is baptized. He comes back up to Capernaum. He goes along by the Sea of Galilee, sees Simon and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea. They were fishermen. That's a technical kind of a net. It's a round net, about 25 feet across, sinkers all the way around. You put it over your arm, and when you see a school of fish by the shore, you throw it out like an umbrella, and it sinks over all of them. The kind of a net that you would use not very far out, and where somebody could have a conversation with you were they walking along the shore. And this is exactly what's happening here. Peter and Andrew, they're plying their trade between Bethsaida and Capernaum. Between the two, follow me, I will make you fishers of men. Or of people, if you want, fishers of people. They leave their net, they follow him. Going on a little further, he sees James, the son of Zebedee, John, his brother, in a boat mending their nets. Mending their nets. This is morning to night fishing is done. If you have a boat to fish, you're going to be out to the sea a bit. You can't shout back and forth so much. These guys have pulled in, and they have nets, plural. And there's a kind of a net that's actually a plurality of nets. You have it here in your book on page 147. It's this one called a trammel net. It's actually made out of three weaves going three different directions that are sewn together as kind of a puffy blanket. It stands up in the water all night. The fish swim through it and get caught. The fish try to get away. They rip and tear the net. So the net, because it's very waterlogged, not just in and out, but very waterlogged, collects algae and collects fish activity, and the net needs to be mended. It's an expensive kind of a net as well. Not just anybody can afford. A cast net, sure, but a trammel net, no. And that tells us that James and John, the sons of Zebedee, have a profitable business. They have the best equipment. They have a boat to go out. And you can see, when they're called, they leave their father and the hired men to follow Jesus, which means you can afford to pay several families off of this business as well. So, different socioeconomic level. And Jesus calling both of them. Again, we see them fishing later. It's not like they forgot how to fish. They still need to supply for, provide for their families. But their orientation in life now is going to be focused on, let's say, things of God. If you want things of the church, things of Jesus. Their orientation now, they have a new a set of partners, right, for their life goals. They come into Capernaum. It's Shabbat. He goes to synagogue to teach. They're amazed at his teaching. He has authority, not like the scribes who keep saying the same stuff all the time. That's not really meaningful for their lives. He heals a man with demons, and they recognize that he has not just power over the spoken word, but power over other human lives as well. Everyone hears about him. News spreads in Galilee, all the other villages, and then they come out of the synagogue. The service is over, and they go into the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. We see Simon, Andrew, James, and John a lot together. They seem to be almost in cooperative fellowship or partnership fishing. We know from the Gospel of John that James and John live in Bethsaida. And it's been suggested maybe Peter and Andrew, their home is Bethsaida as well. But we see that his mother-in-law, Peter's, is sick. So he marries a girl from Capernaum. Because the father doesn't show up in the story. Maybe his father-in-law is dead. And so Peter then, the big fisherman, has homes on both corners of the lake, is responsible for more than one family, actually, including his mother-in-law, his wife's family. He comes, speaks to her, raises her up. Notice how often Jesus touches people. All right? I know that touching people in America all of a sudden has become probably the big issue that it should be. I wonder how Jesus would respond and how he was often interpreted. You have to kind of wonder. And I wonder sort of if we've thrown out the baby with the bathwater, you know what I mean? It's awkward. Jesus, it wasn't awkward to touch people, to heal people, all right? Partly because the human touch means something. Partly because the human touch means something. It should mean something holistic. Supposed to. And partly because of rabbinic understanding of ritual impurity. Where if someone who is impure, and you become impure partly by normally bodily functions, you become partly impure partly by touching dead bodies, you become partly impure if there are skin diseases. Why the rabbis chose these, I don't know. Maybe it's part of just being distinctive from other people. Being ritually impure was not a sin. Everybody has these discharges. Women have more, but never mind. Everybody has these discharges, but they were used as a representative thing to say, in order to appear before God in holy time or holy place, you need to show that you recognize that you all are impure before God, and we need to then take this ritual bath, this mikveh bath, this full immersion bath, in order to show that we are pure before God again, that we've done something about it, and we can then enter it before God's presence. What Jesus does is he goes beyond that, okay? Someone who is ritually impure, or somebody who needs to be healed because of that, Jesus, let's say, makes himself impure by touching them? No. He reverses the polarity so that the healing purity cleanses the one who is not, rather than the one who is not becoming impure as well. Okay? So Jesus touching people would have also shocked people. Yeah? But for the good reasons. Would have shocked them. So he goes, he touches his mother-in-law, raises her up, and she waits on them. That is to say, she is been returned to the fullness of providing and caring for and protecting her family. You know? Being the good host. Evening comes, the Shabbat is over, now people are on the street. Everybody who is ill and possessed in whatever way comes to Jesus for the same. People we read crowding at the door, healing many with various diseases. In the morning, Jesus gets up, well, it's still dark. We read verse 35. Goes to a quiet place, a lonely place. A place with a lot of people. Out of town, you just come right up here. Right up on the slope. We'll see when we get out of town. To refocus, to pray, to get back in touch with his Father. And I would imagine when you go, you don't have to go very far, and the whole lake opens up in front of you. And he knows these people. And he maybe sees some out on the lake after a long night fishing, starting to row in. You know, a few lights popping up maybe, here and there. A little bit of activity starting to pop up. The lake echoes sound. And his disciples find him and say, everybody's looking for you. And I can imagine Jesus, well, he says, I've got work in other towns as well. Yeah? Not just here. And he says, you know, last night, Yossi came. He said his mom was sick, and I promised to go and help her as well. And Yossi said his son is getting married and wants to live in home, and we need to build a room for him. We've got work to do. Let's go. People have needs. People have needs. They're of all kinds. Redemption isn't just fixing sin. It's wholeness of life in every possible way. And Jesus is coming to a place that has all of those possibilities. You know, the great thing about these monasteries, St. Gerasimos, you know, we went there for lunch a couple of days ago, and it's not just a bunch of monks in the desert. It's not just a place people come on Sunday and go home again. It's meant to be a fully active community every day of the week. Yeah? Yes.
When Jesus was walking, and he comes upon Peter and James and Andrew,
Yeah.
do you think that he struck up a conversation first?
I don't know who talked first.
What I'm asking is,
I don't know.
come follow me, and they just drop everything and go.
No, they have to know each other already. In fact, Andrew, we read in the Gospel of John, was already a disciple of John the Baptist down by Jericho. Maybe saw Jesus then. I don't know. No, I can't imagine it was like the first time they ever saw him.
None of it.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine. You know, we read that he was in Capernaum before he was rejected in Nazareth. And then he withdraws to the sea. And then you have the disciples with him.
So is it by word of mouth that they're hearing?
I guess.
And then he shows up, and
I guess.
they get the invitation.
I guess it could be all of that.
Do they have time to say goodbye?
They.
I'm just thinking about their parents. I mean,
This
all of
is a
sudden they're
debated
gone.
point. I don't look. I kick back at that idea. I do. I know that there's a lot who talk about, you know, the picture where you're doing like Elisha with the plow, and you just kind of drop it there, and then, oh, we don't have time to say goodbye, and they never see. I kick back at that. It's too much community. It's too much. They have responsibility for their family. I think there's too much of that, and that a family is supposed to be an economic unit that's large enough to be self-sufficient. You know, a lot of boys, a lot of people helping, a lot of girls, a lot of multi-generational. One gone for a few weeks isn't going to make that much difference. All right, so they come back then. They do a few things again. This is your home base. You know, I don't see Jesus and the 12 with 13 halos walking along, always, never doing anything other than that.
Right.
You know, but it's part of life. I mean, it's part of real life. And what I think is their orientation now is to some bigger calling. Their associative connections is to something bigger than just sort of.
They left their nets and followed him as broad or bigger than just yes.
Stopping to be a fisherman. In Nazareth, they didn't want to do that. Jesus was trying to open their minds by saying, God talked to the widow in Sidon and he helped the leper in Syria. And they didn't want their world opened up. They were just happy staying there. But here I think you have expanding opportunities and people willing to, to go.
There's actually another way of, and you can correct this, but I've heard it said that we can also read this story. Everyone wants to be a rabbi. I mean, not everyone. A rabbi, or learning under a famous rabbi in
Was
their
a
day.
thing to aspire to.
It's something they aspire to. It might be like becoming a professional athlete as being a prominent rabbi, to use a rough analogy. But it's a success. That's success, a sign of success. And so if a rabbi, if a very successful rabbi came to you and said, I want you to be
Part of me.
part of my, I want to teach you, I want you to be my student, that was an honor.
Yeah.
And these guys are common trade, they have common everyday jobs, which may mean that they didn't make the cut with some of the bigger rabbis. And so if you think of it that way, it's possible that when Jesus says, come and follow me, he's actually, it's not so much how could they leave everything, it's more he chose the ones that you wouldn't expect him to choose. And he said, come and I'll make you.
I would imagine that their
Is that
parents and
possible
brothers, yeah, it's
to-
certainly possible. And that the rest of their family would feel honored because that happened. Because they were chosen. But it doesn't mean they never came home again.
And the scripture doesn't say that at 10:38 that morning, he gave the invitation, and at 10:45 they were underway. It says that he gave the invitation, and he probably went home, says, hey honey, there's money in the bank, here's X number, and I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Who knows?
You see, I think you see them back and forth. Yes.
Eventually he says, you ain't going back home. And that's what we never talk about. It's very, very disturbing. Is that we don't have one reference of Jesus ever telling disciples, "You've been gone from your family too long, go home."
You don't have that in the story.
There's never any evidence of that. And eventually he says, "You're going to leave everything and go to the rest of the world."
Yeah.
And as far as we know, many of the disciples never did return home. And in our value system, in our culture, that is very disturbing.
Too big of a call, huh?
Huh?
Too big of a call?
Well, that we would neglect our children and our
Yeah.
families
Yeah.
to go change the world. I mean, soldiers left families to go
Sure.
fight, and merchants would, so it wasn't nearly as different in those days.
Would you say that it was a call that not everybody was up to? Would you say it's a call not everybody should do?
Well, geographically perhaps, but we all need to go into the world.
Yeah.
So we know that they had children. You know, maybe those were some that he
You're
called.
arguing from silence.
Yeah.
Typically people did.
Yeah,
Typically, the rabbis typically got married and they did have children. The texts talk about, the rabbinic sources talk about your own son and raising him up and so on. I guess that most of the disciples probably did. Probably. Well, guys, more things to think about. Yeah.
It's just part of not housebreaking Jesus too much and realizing, you know, there's some disturbing stuff there from our point of view.
Yeah.
And when we want to clean it up and make the Christian life this neat package, it ain't.
Yep. Tov.
But look at George Mueller, how he